Welcome to this session, Designing Proactively for All Learners. We would like to take this opportunity to express our thanks to Region 4 Inclusive Practices Conference Committee for giving us this great opportunity to present at this prestigious conference. In this conference, we will talk about how Universal Design for Learning framework helps to design instruction proactively for all learners to provide equity and bridge gaps in the classroom. Let me share briefly who I am. My name is Mamta Verma, and I am a special education facilitator in BISD. I'm a mom, I'm a grandmom, and a pet grandmother. I have more than 3 decades of classroom experience and admin experience in the United States as well as internationally. I was raised with the vision that learning never stops. And this belief equipped me with an insight that children across the world have similar barriers when it comes to the learning. I am multilingual and English is my second language. Being a ELL learner, it helped me to understand the barriers ELL learners face in the classroom while processing information from one language to another language. Now I am honored to introduce my mentor and my guide, Dr. Brenda Melanson, as my co-presenter. She was the one when I came to United States. She guided me, she mentored me into the US education system. Over to Dr. Brenda Melanson.
Thank you. Mrs. Verma is a dear friend and an exceptional instructional leader. Thank you for this opportunity to work with you again. As she said, I'm Dr. Brenda Melanson. I'm a semi-retired educator with more than 40 years of experience. I'm a rare bird. I'm a native Texan, and all of my education and most of my educating has been done in the state of Texas. I am married to Alex Paul. We have been married for 36 years. We have 2 children, Rashard and Marshall. My educational philosophy is education is a right and not a privilege. Thank you. Back to you, Mrs. Verma.
Thank you, Dr. Brenda Melanson. So before we move to the next section, I just want to give you a brief introduction, how our presentation is going to proceed during this session. So this is basically our one pager, one slide, a Bitmoji slide, where we will be using a couple of digital tools, multiple digital tools like Padlet, Straw Poll, Google Forms, Google Jamboard, and Google Slides. And this is a pre-recorded session, but still it will be interactive session. On the right-hand side, we have all the surveys, Google Jamboard links or Google Slides. They are on the right side of the slide. And on the left hand of the slide, these are all the resources we use to build this presentation. Now, here in the middle of the slide, we have our copy of our presentation link. And under the presentation, you see where the Padlet icon, I would ask everybody to click on it. So in this Padlet, what we have done is we have added all the activities which we will be using back and forth during the presentation to interact with the session. So it has all the numbered slides which we will use. And I will strongly recommend the participants to keep this tab open. Now, I would strongly ask you to take the audience poll. Either you can click on the slide or you can go back to the Padlet. If you click on the audience poll, so we want you to check the appropriate box who you are, because we really want to know who all attended our presentation. Once you will check the box, add your name and click vote. You have 1 minute to complete this poll. Now let's go back to the presentation. Thank you for taking the poll. Let's talk about essential questions which we are going to talk during this presentation. What are the barriers to learning? We all came across some barriers when we were in the classroom as a student, or we come across barriers when we are teacher in the classroom. Why is learner variability a rule, not an exception? Why should we consider learner variability before designing instruction? Because we really want to cater the needs of all learners in the classroom. Then the next question comes, how should we design learning instruction for all with variability and diversity that we have in the classroom, in the learning environment? So let's dig deeper during this presentation. This is my favorite picture and favorite when I was learning about the UDL. So this has been given me all the time, lot of deep understanding how UDL and the learning brain works. When I was a little kid, I was growing, my mom used to tell me she has 4 eyes. And I used to wonder, how come mom knows whenever I do some mischiefs or anything which will not approve it? She always tell, oh, you did that. Then I went to school and my teacher did the same thing with me. And then I learned these patterns when I became mama. I did the same thing for my girls. Then I became a classroom teacher. I did the same thing. Students, I said that, oh, I have 4 eyes, 2 invisible eyes at the back of my head. I figured it out until I learned the UDL and learning brain networks, where it tells about we hear and perceive information from the back of the brain. When the brain receives information, such as when we see and hear, it is received by the back of the brain, including the occipital and temporal lobes of the brain. That is known as what of learning, which aligns with perception, language, symbols, comprehension, and also known as representation network. Then the information is processed and come to the middle of the brain. It started relaying the meaning, and it is known as affective network. It is Y of learning, which aligns with interest, efforts, and persistence, and self-regulation, also known as engagement network. When the information is organized in the frontal lobe, which is the front of the brain, for action and response, and strategic network, which is also known as how of learning, it aligns with physical action, expression, communication, and executive function. So these broad 3 brain networks can be helpful when we design learning experiences. Is it not amazing to learn? Now, before we move further, we need to understand what are some barriers that impact learning. So, what barriers did you face when you were as a student? I remember when I was in kinder, I faced some barriers. I didn't want to go to school because my teacher was very strict. What barriers do you face as a teacher? I faced a barrier because when I started working as a teacher, I didn't know how to differentiate the instructional practices, assignments for my students. Now, what barriers do you face reaching out to all learners face-to-face or virtually during the last year due to the pandemic? So I want you to go to now Padlet, and we are going to take a little brief Google Forms barrier survey. If you click on it, so there are two questions. You can add your name and just what barriers did you face as a student and what barriers do you face as a teacher now? Just whichever is applicable to you. And click on submit. You have 1 minute to complete it. Thank you for taking this Google form. Now let's go back to the presentation. Okay, so these are some barriers which deals with the brain networks. First, we will talk about the affective network barriers. What if the student do not understand the purpose of lesson? What if the assignment is too difficult or too easy? What if the student lacks self-regulation skills or subject matter is irrelevant or boring? What if the student is hungry or distracted? What if the student did not get good night's sleep? Do we think the child is going to engage in the classroom learning? I don't think so. Now let's look at another barrier. The barrier what of learning, which deals with the recognition networks of the brain. If a student has cognitive deficits in comprehension, auditory processing, short-term or long-term memory retrieval, fluid reasoning, poor vision, hearing impairment, or student may be a second language learner. If these barriers are not addressed by providing multiple means of representation, how we expect the student is going to learn what of learning? Maybe the student with low vision has broken his glasses, or he may have forgot his glasses at home. Maybe the room is too noisy. So these factors impact classroom learning. Now, let's look at how of learning barriers. The third barrier. The third barrier impacts how of learning, which deals with the strategic network of the brain. If a student have issues with expressive communication skills or lack of resources to express himself or herself, or he may have poor motor skills, he may have poor handwriting or keyboarding skills. So how we are going to determine that learning has been occurred? Now, our presentation is divided into 3 parts. We are going to address all 3 learning networks. First, we are going to talk about how and why of learning we are affective network. What does come to your mind when you see this image? For me, the fingerprints show me unique, distinct, different, diverse, dissimilar, variable. This talks about that we have learner variability in the classroom. That is why it is so unlikely anyone has the same fingerprints as you. About a 1 in 64 billion chance. Is it not amazing? When fingerprints are not identical, that is why we are offered one-size-fits-all approach. Where is an average brain that can be instructed with the approach one-size-fits-all, all like fingerprints? No two brains are alike. Each brain is a complex, interconnected web that is sculpted and influenced by genetics and interaction with the environments. Even twins are not alike. My 2 daughters, they have the same genetics and they were provided the same environment, and they are both different. We have to deal with them differently. The UDL affective networks provide guidelines to engage learner variability in the classroom. The learner variability embraces both students who struggle and students who thrive. All learners have strengths, weaknesses, and the area of interest with the context of learning environments. Educators can identify strength, needs, interests of individual students across the learning networks. Who are these students? How do they learn best? What strengths, cultural backgrounds, learning styles, or interests do they bring to the learning situation? What form of communication do they use? How do they execute, plan for learning, and what are their talents? So we should need to pay attention closely when we are addressing the variability in the classroom. Now, we are going to talk about this learner variability is the rule, not the exception. This is a 6-page long article and written by Barbara Pape. And I would strongly recommend all the participants, when you have your time, please read this article. This is a great resource. It will give you tons of information how we can address variability in the classroom. I'm going to briefly overview this article. Let's say we have 20 students in our classroom with diverse population. What will be our first step? Our first step should be we need to look in the classroom demographics. How I'm going to engage all the learners. As per UDL principle, I am going to address affective network. I can only address if I understand each learner has unique needs. In order to address those needs, I need to engage multiple those students in the classrooms. So now let's go back to the Padlet where I will show you this link. Here is the link. Now, I would ask you to go to the page 4 and just glance this page 4 to understand more about it, what learner variability is. Page 4, just scan what learner variability is. After reading this page, you will have a new definition for learner variability, I guess. So you guys have 1 minute to scan this page 4. Okay, so now let's go back to the Padlet again. Now we are going to do a little activity. Let's click on this link, link 4. After reading the page 4, I want you guys to post your definition, the new definition of variability after reading the page 4. So what you will do is you will click on the sticky note and post your definition here. So you have another 1 minute to complete this activity. You are going to post your new definition of variability Thank you very much for completing this activity. So now let's go back to the presentation. Now, we are addressing the next recognition network, which is what of learning. How we gather facts and categorize what we see, hear, read, identify letters, words, and author style in the recognition task. So now let's learn about what of learning brain networks. Now the question comes, how should I get started? Right? We know what learner variability is. Now, how we are going to provide the multiple means of recognition network. So what we need to consider. There are 3 steps how to get started. The first, designing instruction proactively. Planning with UDL is proactive, not reactive. So first we need to think, are my lesson goals are clear and specific? Are my goals and state standards similar? At what step learner variability is important and why? The second step is implementation of instruction. Which instructional approach will be used in the classroom? Am I using co-teaching? In co-teaching, am I using team teaching? Or am I using station teaching? Or am I using the small teaching? How are students using available options, resources, and tools? Who is going to help students if the student gets stuck, if they are not achieving what we hoped for? Do we have classroom procedures? If I have a co-teacher or I have a paraprofessional in the classroom, who is going to take care if behavior occurs in the classroom? What if I have to reteach? What formative and summative assessments we are going to use? And who and how we are collecting data? The third step is how we are going to reflect and redesign. How did the lesson go? Were all students able to progress towards the goal? How could I tell? What are some ideas you want to integrate into the lesson design next time? And how did the goal drive design decisions? If we follow these steps proactively, we are going to design instruction for everyone. Now, we are going to show you a great resource. Next 3 slides, you have links in the Padlet and we have link in the PowerPoint as well. So we are going to show you this variability navigator, which is a great resource, which you can use in design proactively for all the learners. So let's listen to this YouTube video.
Welcome to our free Learner Variability Navigator. Our mission is to help educators and EdTech teams more easily find and implement research-based strategies that support the whole child. You can access our content and learn more about what we do here on our homepage. Let's dive in by selecting a model from the Navigator bar. I'm selecting Reading PK3. This is a learner model about page. It introduces the key concepts, factors, and strategies that support this model's goal, reading comprehension. Let's review what factors are in this learner model. We can use the Factors tab at the top of the page. This is the factor map of learning science-based factors that impact children's reading development. When you hover over one factor, others light up. This is because research shows they are connected. That means if you want to support a factor like background knowledge, there are other factors that may come into play that you should explore and potentially support. Let's look at a factor in detail. This is a factor summary page. It provides a short definition of the factor, a factor connection diagram with connection sentences about each factor, and strategies that support this factor. Let's review a strategy in detail. This strategy summary page has an overview of the strategy, videos about using the strategy in the classroom and in EdTech products, resources, and the factors this strategy supports. You can view all the strategies of a learner model by going to the Strategies tab at the top of the page. Here are all the strategies for this learner model, Reading PK3. On the left are factors that, when selected, will filter down the strategies on the right. So if I select background knowledge, attention, and motivation, these are the strategies that support all of the selected factors.
Okay, so now I want you to go to the Padlet. Now you will go to the sixth activity. You will click on it and you will explore for 2 minutes this resource. The purpose of exploring this resource is, if you will explore it, because I believe learning by doing, you will remember it and you will use when you will design your instruction next time, you will definitely share this instruction with your other team members. So you guys have 2 minutes to explore this resource. How do you find this resource? And this is with all the language literacy, cognition, social, emotional learning, and student background. These factors really help to give us strategies that we can use in our classroom. Is it not a good resource? Okay, so now we are going back to our presentation.
Welcome to our free Learn.
Okay, so now we are going to explore another resource. This is highly recommended resource as well, which we are using in our district as well. So I am going to click this. The resource name is Accommodation Central. Let's click on this link. If you click on accommodations, sometimes when we share our IEP bundles with our general education teachers, they don't know how to implement accommodations in the classroom. So if you have click on academic needs, click on reading, and let's find accommodations for reading. So how many accommodations did we find? 32 accommodations. So let's scroll more. Okay, usually we get too many questions about chunking. So let's learn a little bit about chunking. Okay, so now it has given a definition what chunking is. Then it tells you it is allowable on at least one state assessment. Then it talks about some suggestive, where we can use some suggestions. And then it has given examples, how you can chunk the material. Examples, chunking long assignments and projects. chunking text. Then there is a video. And then how to implement. There are 7 steps how you can implement in the classroom. Is it not a great resource to learn more about accommodations, how to implement accommodations in the classroom? So let's go back again to the accommodations. Now I'm going to show one accommodation when we click on functional need. Oh, we all have a lot of attention issues in the classroom. Let's see what it provides. So it has given me 36 results. Chunking is another resource. So these are all resources. Hopefully you like this resource and you are going to use in the classroom while planning your instruction. Now let's go back to our presentation. There's one more resource I want to share with you. So this is another resource which is accommodation for all. Basically, this provides some digital tools. Since we are in virtual world now, due to the pandemic, we have to suddenly come up with the virtual resources. So this resource have multiple virtual resources. So let's click on graphic organizers because our students, they use graphic organizers. So here are some digital tools. Here is a research behind why should we use graphic organizers. Then some digital tools to create graphic organizers. Microsoft OneNote, which we can create fillable advanced organizers. Then you can create graphic organizers through Google Drawing. Then there's a tutorial how to create one. Lucidchart. Read, Write, Think. Creatively. So here are some links, ready-made digital graphic organizers. So this offers many other tools which you can access on your own. So it has dyslexic accommodations as well, how to highlight a note and taking, expression tools, accessibility tools, read aloud. So it has multiple tools which you can utilize when you are planning the instruction. Okay, now let's go back to our presentation. Now, I would definitely ask you to go to the Padlet. So it's a reflection time because we need to reflect. It is activity 9. So the question is, now you have seen 3 resources which you can utilize when you are planning, designing classroom instruction. So how would you utilize these resources to plan instruction? You guys have 1 minute to complete this reflection. Just click on the sticky note and add your response. Thank you guys for completing this response. Now let's go back to the presentation. Okay, so now let's talk about it, how we should design. There are 6 steps. In the how of learning, we are going to see how we are using these steps to plan a UDL lesson. So let me go over briefly on these 6 steps. to plan UDL lesson. The first lesson is ask yourself what is the goal of my lesson? Think about it, your TEKS. Think about your state standards. The second step, consider learner variability, because this is a very important. If you know your learner variability, then you are going to plan lesson and cater the needs of all learners. Make sure if you know the student reading levels and the barriers, think about what barriers you are going to anticipate in the classroom. If the student have any behavior issues or having vision issues, we need to be proactive addressing those issues. Think about it, how you're going to address appropriate assessment, how you're going to collect the data, whether your students are going to master the goal. Think about it, what methods, materials, and media you are going to use. What videos are you going to use? Are you using the Google Classroom? Are you using the Seesaw? Make sure you should be aware of that, and you should be ready to implement in the classrooms. Now, number 5, teach and assess learning. How you are going to plan your summative and formative assessments. And number 6, the final is how you are going to see if your student masters the goal, or still you need to redesign and provide one-on-one intensive instruction. Okay, so this is a brief overview. In the next couple of slides, when we address the how of learning when we planning, you will have a brief case study, which was taken from the 6 steps of planning UDL lessons. And then I'm going to show you how the teacher from this resource, how they planned the lesson to address the UDL framework. So in the first, they talked about it, the learning goal. The learning goal based on the case study was the Kinder ELA literacy standard. And it focused primarily on language and social skills. Instructional methods. There are multiple instructional methods. Direct instruction, mental modeling, question answer, discussion, cooperative learning. Materials. They added proactively what materials they will need when they are teaching those students. They had word cards, they have call and response techniques, they have physical response techniques, photos, student paired with their names. So they have all proactively, all the instruction materials they're going to use in the classroom. How they're going to assessment. So they have check for understanding in the beginning of the lesson, hold up 2 fingers. Skill checklist, they will continue using when they use who and what questions during question answers. And group picture card exercise. And finally, the reflection. After planning and implementation this lesson, Laura realizes that she used UDL strategies already. And she found that students were engaged and there were no behavior issues. Now we are taking to the next section of Universal Design for Learning PowerPoint, which is how of learning. So now Dr. Brenda Melanson is going to take over and she will walk through how of learning. Thank you, Dr. Brenda Melanson.
Thank you, Mrs. Verma. Now that you have all of this knowledge about designing proactively for learners, let's practice. Next slide, please. You're going to design instructions based on this scenario. Each slide represents a number, and each slide represents a number. Add your name on the top of the slide. Okay. Mamta has 22 students of a diverse student population. She has a co-teacher who supports her 60 minutes daily. They get to plan together face-to-face or online during their planning time once a week. 2 of her students are advanced and they complete their work ahead of the class and become loud and noisy after completion of the work. The 2 students have long-term memory and processing speed issues. She has students who read below grade level and get overwhelmed when they have long reading passages. They struggle with basic comprehension, such as main idea and supporting details. 4 students are English language learners, 2 are intermediate level, and 2 are on the beginning level. 3 students have several accommodations, such as extra time, frequent feedback, and reminders to stay on task, oral administration, and text to speech. 1 student requires 504 accommodations. Next slide, please. When you are planning your lesson, please keep these 4 questions in mind. Who am I teaching? What am I teaching? How will I teach it? And how will I know if the students understand? Padlet, please. Can we go to the Padlet, please? You will have 5 minutes to complete this lesson. You may begin. Two minutes. 30 seconds. Stop. Back to you, Ms. Verma.
Dr. Brenda Melanson is going to also explain what instructional approach should we use.
What instructional approach should we use? Traditional instruction? I'll let you be the judge. Teaching focuses on what is taught. The teacher decides how the material is taught. She doesn't take into consideration her learners or how they learn or any of that. There is one way for a student to complete an assignment. No flexibility in the assignment. It's my way or the highway. Accommodations are for specific students. You don't have any accommodations, then I'm not going to give you any. The classroom has a fixed setup, and you better not mess with my setup. Everybody sits in their chair. They don't move a muscle. They look straight at the teacher. Grades are used to measure performance. And then you have universal design for all, for learning instruction. Teaching focuses on both what is taught and how. The teacher works with the student to decide how the student will learn the material. There are multiple ways to complete an assignment. Accommodations are for all students. The classroom has a flexible setup, and grades are used to reinforce goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Melanson. Okay, so guys, now we almost ended the presentation. Okay, so during this planning, at any point, did you plan for an average student? So what is your takeaway for planning a UDL lesson? Share one idea that you utilize from today's presentation. Email your response at mamta.verma@brazos.isd. We would love to hear your response. Okay, so here we have references. So if you want to learn more about what we utilized during this presentation, you have links to go. You can read at your own. Okay, so now let's go to the last slide. Okay, thank you for your time. As per Google, there are roughly 6,500 languages spoken in the world and 6,500 different phrases to express gratitude. Even though we may serve 22 students at the elementary level, more at the secondary level, we deal with variability and diversity in one single classroom. So please pay close attention to the quote and start planning intentionally and proactively. When I'm stuck on what I'm going to teach or how I'm going to teach it, I take a minute to think about who I am teaching. And those rock stars deserve nothing but my best every single day. Thank you so much. We appreciate for your time and hope you like this presentation.